Imagine a child who never smiled sincerely, not even once. A child who never knew his mother's embrace, never felt the warmth of a friend, never even understood the meaning of the word freedom. A child born human, but turned into a machine, all in the name of perfection. This isn't fiction ripped from a horror movie. This is the story of Kiyotaka Ayanokoji, the protagonist of Classroom of the Elite and one of the darkest, most complex characters in anime history. In this video, we're diving deep into his dark past, uncovering the details of the White Room, his relationships with those around him, and why so many viewers consider his story sadder than almost any other tragedy in anime, even though he's never shed a single tear on screen. Stay till the end, because the last few details will completely change how you see him. It all began in a place known as the White Room. This isn't an ordinary school, and it's not an educational institution in any sense we'd recognize. It's a secretive, extremely disciplined facility designed with a single purpose: to strip a child of their humanity entirely and rebuild them as a flawless tool. The children placed there, Ayanokoji among them, weren't treated as human beings with feelings, needs, or dreams. They were treated as experimental projects that had to be improved and developed constantly, without pause, without mercy. The program relied on non-stop, round-the-clock mental and physical training that left no room for rest. Harsh psychological and cognitive tests, specifically designed to break any sign of weakness. Near total isolation from the outside world. No TV, no friends, not even normal play. A deliberate, calculated deprivation of the most basic human emotions: love, tenderness, family warmth. The goal behind all of this was never to raise a well-adjusted child. It was to manufacture a flawless genius, a perfect human built to cold, calculated specifications. And the most dangerous part? This wasn't some random or chaotic system. It was a meticulously designed methodology, applied systematically to a number of children at once, as if they were locked in a permanent race to prove who deserved to survive as the successful version. This is where the real tragedy lies, and the fundamental difference between Ayanokoji's story and similar ones in anime. Usually, when we hear about a character who lost their childhood, it's because of a tragic accident, a war that suddenly broke out, or the unexpected loss of a parent. In those cases, childhood is taken by circumstances beyond anyone's control. But Ayanokoji's case is completely different and darker by deliberate design. His childhood wasn't stolen by chance or by some passing catastrophe. It was carefully planned and deliberately taken from him from the very first moment, in service of a larger, colder goal: manufacturing the perfect human to serve an agenda far bigger than himself. He was never a child for even a single day of his life. He never had the right to cry without being punished for it, never had the right to play without being evaluated for it, never even had the right to dream without having that mistake corrected. He was quite simply a work in progress under constant development. Because of this brutal environment, Ayanokoji learned one fundamental lesson from his earliest years, a lesson carved deep into his mind. Emotion is weakness, and weakness gets punished immediately. So, without ever really choosing to, he began suppressing everything inside him. Joy whenever he felt it, sadness whenever it weighed on him, anger whenever someone provoked him, even fear in the darkest moments. Over time, he lost the ability to feel naturally and spontaneously, and lost the ability to easily read and understand the emotions of the people around him. This is exactly what explains that unervingly cold demeanor we see in the anime. It's not arrogance, as some might assume, and it's not an innate cruelty of heart. It's a direct, logical result of the systematic destruction of his entire childhood. Every time Ayanokoji appears eerily calm in a situation that shakes everyone else around him, remember, that calm wasn't born with him. It was forced into him through training as his only defense mechanism, learned from the time he was a small child. One of the most painful details of Ayanokoji's backstory is that he wasn't the only child in the White Room. There were other children who went through the same program, the same brutal training methods. But the relationship between them was never one of siblings or friends in any normal sense. It was closer to a constant, relentless competition and comparison, where every child was measured against the others, ranked by who was closest to perfection. This means Ayanokoji never even learned the meaning of real friendship in the one place where it might have been possible. Even the people who should have been his peers were, in reality, potential rivals in a merciless race. This is what makes his later attempts to connect with his classmates in Class D so much more significant than they might first appear. It's the first time in his life he's faced with people who don't just want to outperform him, but who simply want, plainly and honestly, to be by his side. When Ayanokoji enrolled at the advanced nurturing high school, he had every outward tool for success. An intelligence far beyond most of the people around him, cold, precise analysis of every situation, and an astonishing ability to manipulate the course of events without ever stepping into the spotlight himself. But he lacked the simplest thing that any ordinary teenager takes for granted. He didn't know how to build a genuine human relationship. He didn't even know how to start one. Because everything he'd been taught before, forcibly and repeatedly, boiled down to a single lesson that never changed. People are tools, used to achieve goals, and discarded once they're no longer useful. So even when he began, cautiously and very slowly, to get closer to his Class D classmates, like Susan Horikita or Kikyo Kushida, every step felt to him like an entirely new experiment on completely unfamiliar ground. He chooses his words carefully, watches every reaction, calculates each interaction like a mathematical equation, because quite simply he never had the natural human intuition that any child normally develops just by growing up. One of the most complicated relationships in Ayanokoji's story is his bond with the figure largely responsible for shaping him inside the White Room. This person was never a teacher in the warm, human sense of the word, but closer to an engineer building a product, not a parent raising a child. Any word of encouragement, if it ever existed at all, was tied strictly to performance and results. And any failure, no matter how small, was met with a harsh response meant to make sure it never happened again. This kind of relationship planted a deep confusion in Ayanokoji about the meaning of worth and self-value. He learned to measure himself only by his achievements, never by who he was as a person. This partly explains why he often seems indifferent to praise or recognition from others, because deep down, he never learned that he could be valued simply for existing. What's even more painful than everything mentioned so far, despite all his extraordinary abilities, and despite one victory after another within the walls of his school, Ayanokoji lives with a deep inner emptiness that's never easily satisfied. He's smart enough to outperform nearly everyone around him with seemingly no effort at all, but in his rare, quiet moments, he's still searching for the answer to a question far bigger than any school exam. Who am I really outside of everything I was trained to become? This is what makes his character fundamentally different from any other stereotypical cold genius in anime. Because behind that unsettling calm and that faint, mysterious smile that rarely reaches his eyes, there's a person quietly searching for meaning in his own existence, searching for an answer to a question he was never even allowed to ask as a child. If we compare Ayanokoji to other tragic characters in anime, we find a fundamental difference that makes his story uniquely its own. Characters like Itachi Uchiha sacrificed themselves through a conscious decision they made while fully understanding its cost. Other characters lost loved ones in a single tragic moment that permanently changed the course of their lives. But Ayanokoji was never given the chance to choose in the first place. There was no decision he made, no sudden accident that happened to him. His childhood was an environment engineered from the ground up, designed by adults for a distant goal with no regard for humanity whatsoever. And he simply was born into this system before he ever had the chance to know that another path in life was even possible. This is exactly what makes his tragedy quieter on the surface, but crueler at its core, because it wasn't imposed on him in a single moment. It was built into him over the course of his entire life. Ayanokoji's tragedy isn't found in physical pain or in the battles and confrontations he faces within the walls of his school. It's something far deeper and far harder to confront. The loss of his own humanity from the very first moment of his life, before he was even old enough to understand what being human meant. He has every ingredient for strength, intelligence, and success that so many people dream of, but he was denied the simplest things that make life actually worth living. Unconditional love, real belonging, and the freedom to simply be yourself without being measured or evaluated for it. And that's exactly what makes his story one of the most somber and moving in all of anime. Not because it's filled with blood and battles, but because it's quiet, cold, and disturbingly realistic. If this complex character moved you the way he moved us, drop a comment. Do you think Ayanokoji will ever find his inner peace and finally learn how to truly feel? Also let us know, which other anime character do you think has a past just as dark as Ayanokoji's? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into anime's most complex characters. See you in the next video.